Anthem. You all know the name. How many times have we heard there's a Destiny killer on the horizon? One that'll finally become more popular than Bungie's looter shooter juggernaut. Most of the time, they come to nothing. But before Anthem's release, things seemed different. I can't even begin to express how much hype there was about this game when it was revealed. A project helmed by the legendary BioWare, famous for games such as KOTOR, Dragon Age Origins, and Mass Effect, set in a completely new, interesting universe. How could anyone not get excited over a game like this? Well, we all remember what happened with Mass Effect Andromeda, which released just a couple of years before Anthem did. Safe to say, the release of a good game doesn't result in a cascade of poor reviews and hundreds of thousands of frustrated gamers. Surely the same thing wouldn't happen with Anthem, right? BioWare could not mess this up. EA needed this to break into another genre. The suits needed their big live service win. Well, you're about to find out what happened to Anthem and the death of Anthem. Because this is the history of the ultimate Destiny killer, the story of Anthem, and I'm not telling this story from the perspective of, wow, remember that messy launch? I'm telling it from the perspective that matters now. Anthem is dead. Not dead like low player count. It is dead like you literally cannot go back and play it. EA shut the servers down on January 12th of 2026. And because Anthem was always online with no real offline mode, the game became unplayable, and that changes the entire tone of this video. Because Anthem isn't just a tale about hype and disappointment anymore. Anthem is a cautionary tale about what it means to pay for a game that can be removed from you later, while you sit there powerless and unable to stop it. Anthem underperformed when it was released in January 2019. EA expected the game to sell between 5 and 6 million units by the end of March 2019, but it didn't meet those expectations. Initial reviews were mixed. Some fans praised the combat and the visuals, but were confused by a poor story and didn't like the grind combined with network issues that plagued the game in its early stages. But the real question is, how does a team up between one of the most beloved studios in the industry and one of the biggest publishers out there result in something like this? Because Anthem didn't fail from a single mistake. It failed from a chain reaction. There were development issues, there was leadership indecisions, there was engine limitations, there was time pressure, and there was genre just pure whiplash. And then again, years later, it failed in a way that is honestly even more important. It was shut down and it vanished. It all started almost 10 years ago in August of 2014. Have you ever heard of a series called Mass Effect? It's kind of small, indie vibes. Not many people know about it. Maybe you've heard the name Shepard before. Maybe not. It's not like it's one of the most popular and critically acclaimed franchises of all time. So, in August of 2014, the executive producer of the original Mass Effect trilogy, Casey Hudson, left BioWare because he thought that the rest of his team would be fine without him. That was kind of a mistake, but also a compliment to Hudson, because it seemed that he was doing a really good job. Development struggled a bit without him. Things got a little worse when, in early 2015, the lead writer of Dragon Age, David Gaider, was assigned to the Anthem team. Now, this guy was absolutely no slouch. If any of you are fans of HK-47 from Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, you have to say a big thank you to David Gaider, and he worked on so many of BioWare's most popular games. However, when it came to Anthem, there was a misfire of sorts. Gaider changed the story to make it closer to the cadence of Mass Effect and Dragon Age. But this was an issue for developers who were frustrated that it seemed too similar to what they had already put out. And because it forced them to suddenly change the sorts of things that they'd been doing previously. Things got even worse in early 2016, when Gaider left BioWare and the story went closer towards what it had resembled before, but it was still not entirely coherent. Apparently, this is where things all begin to go wrong, because of leadership. No, I promise you this video isn't about Bungie, I know what you're thinking, but yeah, BioWare had a lot of issues because of indecision and mismanagement from the higher-ups. This was also made worse because of the issues surrounding Mass Effect Andromeda. This was a project that was soon to release, but needed more than a miracle in order to be saved. And as a result of this, members of BioWare were instructed to stop working on Anthem temporarily so that they could attempt to help the sinking, or, well, crashing, ship that was Mass Effect Andromeda. This was combined with the difficulties that arose from using the Frostbite engine. In Jason Schreier's article for Kotaku, he efficiently explains just how much of a headache Frostbite for BioWare really was. Quote, "Frostbite is full of razor blades." One former BioWare employee told a few weeks ago, aptly summing up the feelings of perhaps hundreds of game developers who have worked at EA over the past few years. For those of you who don't know, Frostbite is a game engine created by DICE, the guys behind Battlefield, aka one of the best FPS franchises in all of gaming. 2042 doesn't exist. Don't know what you're talking about. EA wanted all of its studios to use the same engine for their games to save money and time, but there were really big issues for BioWare devs when they tried using Frostbite to implement their ideas. To make matters worse, several BioWare devs who were already familiar with Frostbite had been moved to work on the latest FIFA, EA's biggest moneymaker and flagship franchise. Speaking of EA and money, apparently according to Jason Schreier of the Kotaku article, BioWare didn't often receive the support it needed from EA's Frostbite support team, because RPGs didn't make nearly enough money for EA to really care. Ultimately, the BioWare devs had to cut out a lot of features from Anthem that they had originally wanted in the game, such as crafting and survival. Ironically, when Anthem was first revealed and released, many people labeled it the fabled Destiny killer, a game to finally end Bungie's hold over the looter-shooter genre. However, during the development at BioWare, mentioning Destiny in conversation or making comparisons between Anthem and Destiny was not a good thing. In the Kotaku article, Schreier states that a few people worked on the game said that they were trying to make comparisons to Destiny, and that would elicit negative reactions from studio leadership. "We were told quite definitively, this isn't Destiny," said one developer. But it kind of is. What you're describing is beginning to go into that realm. They didn't want to make those correlations, but at the same time, when you're talking about fire teams and going off and doing raids together, about gun combat, spells, things like that, there's a lot of elements there that correlate, that cross over. Now, a personal anecdote here. I have content creator friends who are mainly Destiny creators. They spoke on Anthem and how they were asked from the Destiny space to give feedback to BioWare on what to implement in the final game to win the Destiny audience over, just for all of their feedback to go into a trash can. So we have a Destiny killer that wasn't actually meant to be anything like Destiny. Plagued with development issues, unclear decisions from leadership, it seemed that virtually everything went wrong during the development of this game. It was so bad that Anthem was still in pre-production when it was announced at E3 in 2017. One of the biggest issues aside from rush development and crunch was the fact that most of the higher-ups, if not all of them, had no real idea of what sort of a game Anthem should even be. BioWare was traditionally known for deep narratives, powerful stories designed to compel you through a journey. It must have been difficult for developers with experience creating story-driven RPGs to shift focus onto an online shooter in the same vein as Destiny, while also being told they can't make a game like Destiny. And we've seen this industry-wide. Studios great at one genre decide to create games in genres they're unfamiliar with because someone wanted to cash in on a trend. A perfect example is the Lord of the Rings Gollum developer situation, where the developers were used to making point-and-click adventure games were suddenly told to make a AAA game with a fraction of the budget. And don't even get me started on the Suicide Squad. Oh my god, that is the worst game I've ever played. It's already difficult enough to specialize in a certain type of game and make hits like Mass Effect and Dragon Age, so it's even more difficult to swap genres and make a completely different kind of game at the same level as your previous projects. And given everything we've discussed, it's no surprise that Anthem had issues. Just look at this tweet from Ian Satterdalen, a BioWare developer who worked on the game. He said that the team knew it wasn't ready, and that the game was literally created in around 15 months, and that Anthem 2 would have been great. That says it all. If BioWare couldn't develop Anthem in that short of a space of time, safe to say, nobody would have been able to. It is no surprise then that as Anthem launched, the story kept getting worse and worse. Before we cover the ill-fated launch, there's something important that we have to mention. In 2017, a guy called Mark Dara was brought in as the executive producer of Anthem. To be honest, think of him like a surgeon performing life-saving surgery at the very last second. Not to discredit the hard work of all the developers who put tons of energy into Anthem, but it is safe to say that if not for Dara, Anthem might not have existed in 2019. What Dara did was essentially give the teams direction in a way that they hadn't received before. It's always going to be easier to do your job properly when your management is giving you clear instructions and laying down proper expectations that allow you to work on exactly how much you need to do. That being said though, it was obviously still virtually impossible to try to fix everything that had been broken during the troubling years of Anthem's development. There were still many parts of the game that really suffered up until launch, with story and level design being some of the ones that struggled the most. This is all on top of the fact that the developers knew they really didn't have enough time to properly sort out all of the flaws within the game, as well as the numerous server issues that existed throughout the final year of development, which meant that sometimes developers couldn't even log on to test for bugs. Even just months before launch, really major things were still being fine-tuned, and in some cases, straight up added to the game. For those of you who haven't played Anthem regularly, yes, that's right, all 12 of you, you might be shocked to realize that the launch bay was only added into the game in the very final stages of development. For those of you who are unaware, this was a social space like the Tower in Destiny, where players could show off their cosmetic items to other players. Yeah, this was only added in at the last minute. I want to be clear though, this was not because the developers didn't realize this would be necessary for an online shooter, nor was it because they did, because they had to. They just completely ran out of time. Imagine trying to cook a 3-course meal for 7 people in a quarter of the amount of time it usually takes. Impossible, right? The situation got even worse for BioWare, because they had to release Anthem at quite possibly the worst time ever. Because of just how well Bungie and Destiny were doing at the same time. Anthem came out in February of 2019, but we gotta remember that Bungie split from Activision just 1 month before, and coming off of a monumental community puzzle called Niobe Labs. Now, this was at the time where we all thought Activision was the problem, and at the same time, Forsaken had been out for 6 months and it was phenomenal, as most of you are aware. Both of these things ensured that everyone was super hyped for the future of Destiny. So most people didn't want to put Destiny down and pick up a new looter shooter game. It makes you think, if Anthem had released during one of Destiny's weaker years, would people have stuck around longer? And I think that answer is absolutely yes. If Anthem launched now, after a more divisive year like Lightfall, Final Shape, I mean, we're so far gone from Destiny having relevance at the moment, players would have been willing to stick around and let the devs cook. We've seen redemption arcs happen. No Man's Sky, Cyberpunk, maybe Marathon, etc. Games that launched in rough shape, but were then given time to recover. But Anthem never got that chance. While the devs did what they could, when launch came around, Anthem's fate arrived exactly as you'd imagine. In short, it was bad. Like, really bad. Just look at some of the reviews from February of 2019. It's meh best. I really wanted to like this game. Resident Evil 2 and Red Dead 2 spoiled me too much. Some good particle effects, huge loading times, cluttered UI, generic enemies, meh story and characters.
Got it. I taunted everything.
Yeah, they're just kind of fumbling around. Like, what? You know, this actually reminds me of Andromeda.
Oh shit, okay, now they fucking...
This other review would say the story is cliche and downright boring. Combat is nothing new, weapons are bland, and of course, the game is unoptimized garbage that will constantly stop working while playing or downright kick you for server issues or said optimization issues.
Since this is EA and this is a big company, I expect nothing but perfection in 2 minutes and 31 seconds. It's just gonna immediately come up. Everything's gonna be fine, no problems, bug-free, perfect gaming experience. I expect absolutely nothing less from a multi-bajillion-dollar company. And I think you're all with me, aren't you?
Another one would say a lot of games are hard to review. Anthem isn't one of them. Excellent graphical fidelity and wonderful flight mechanics. The narrative is a botched attempt at a traditional BioWare story. This isn't helped by banal environments, which consist of forest ruin after forest ruin, non-stop over and over again. Interrupted massive load times. As everyone suspected before, this is Destiny Light. Let's focus on that last one for a second. I think despite how overwhelmingly negative it is, it identifies the issues with the game in a way that completely corroborates everything the developers were going through. If they just had a little more time, they could have made something really special. But they needed to release the game before EA's fiscal year ended in March 2019. They just didn't have enough time to iron out the flaws that were blindingly clear to players at launch. Of course, these are Metacritic user reviews, so you gotta take them with a pinch of salt. Well, more like a bathtub of salt, but you get the point. They're not necessarily indicative of the way that everyone felt about the game at launch, but they're still informative all the same. When I was scrolling through the Metacritic user reviews, there were hundreds of negative reviews, but there were a lot of positive ones, and singled out the beauty behind the dirt. A really surprising amount of people were adamant that Anthem was a wonderful game to play, if you did your best to get past the optimization issues and some dodgy gameplay elements. I'm bringing up these reviews because it's clear that with enough love and time, Anthem could have been saved. Something else that helped doom Anthem from the get-go was the developers banning my friend and content creator, Mr. Glad.
And then I got on today, and I was like, I told my whole stream on while I was streaming Destiny, and I told them the previous day, and I told Twitter, I said, listen, I'm going to be playing, going to try to get a couple solid days of Anthem in. I'm excited. I want to get some gear. I'm really, I think the game has a lot of potential, and I think the devs have shown a lot of potential as well, because they're really listening to feedback and they're fixing things quickly, and they seem to be on top of their shit. But this particular incident is a little strange to me.
Nope, not temporarily, permanently banning him from playing the game. I'm gonna assume most of you know who Glad is, but for those who are unaware of the situation, I'm going to assume that some of you guys don't know who Glad is. Glad was actively in the Destiny community for a long time. He also has multiple world's first races in Destiny, and was one of the largest Destiny streamers going into Anthem's release. However, he was much more important for the Anthem community because he was like the main streamer covering Anthem. He was certainly one of the most popular and influential ones, other than yours truly, of course. When he got banned, it just sucked all of the oxygen out of the room for Anthem, and the game had no real audience on places like Twitch and YouTube. Even if the game would have gotten better in the future, it's safe to say not as many people would be exposed to it, and not as many people would be talking about it, as a result of Glad getting banned. Glad got banned in March of 2019, right after Anthem's release, literally the month right after launch, and to be honest, that really set the tone for the future of the game. People were willing to stick around and see where the game was going. In their eyes, if Glad saw something in it, then there had to be something there. Anthem's launch had already been absolutely terrible, but Glad getting banned was just sort of the straw that broke the camel's back for many people who were willing to give it a chance. Anyway, moving on from the silly decision to ban Glad from Anthem, the beauty of games like Destiny and Warframe is that they can change over time and become much better than they originally were. Fans of Anthem were hopeful that the same could happen to it. Given enough time, and at one point, it did seem like there was a chance for Anthem to be born again. And then EA happened. In May of 2020, reports noted that BioWare confirmed the existence of a small team working on making Anthem much, much better than it was at release. This was Anthem 2.0, an overhaul meant to address core issues and revamp progression so activities felt more rewarding, a second chance in the truest sense. But by February of 2021, the Anthem 2.0 project had been cancelled. Developers were reassigned to other BioWare projects. This was a massive blow to everyone passionate about Anthem, from the fans who stuck with it to the devs who wanted to rescue it. It's such a shame that such a brilliant concept never got the chance to become something amazing. And here's the part that used to be the comedic beat in my original version of this story. Well, that's right, just for 4 cold hard American dollars, I did buy Anthem back then and replayed the elements that worked well and what were the remains of Anthem 2.0. Except now, in 2026, that line hits differently because we can't still go back. And that is what matters for this video. Anthem became a game you can only visit through footage, memory, and whatever preservation scraps the community can stitch together. It's a tomb you can walk around in on YouTube, not a world that you can step into. Originally, my time with Anthem was meant to be for a series called Destiny Killers. In a style akin to the Iron Pineapple series on Souls-likes, I would go and play games that have similar elements to Destiny in some way. Most of these fell closer to roguelikes, and I do want to continue this series, so make sure you subscribe for that. But Anthem was the spearhead of them all. In my episode, I discussed the beauty of the world, the flight mechanics, and that there was still some technical issues. But the more I played for this video, the more I noticed the world was actually very bugless. A lot of the bugs people complained about were due to server issues kicking them back to the menu, and stuttering during flying. But that was mostly because the game forced you to be online all the time, and we know how those EA servers are. So I played Anthem fully, and it was okay. Sometimes it had flashes of being great, but it has mostly undiscovered potential, and no amount of rose tint for the flying was going to fix that. I'll begin with what I loved. The flying, while immaculate, had some deeper mechanics than I was prepared for. I loved the barrel rolling in the sky, and the diving near water to refresh the engines. It kept me engaged. I also really loved how much of a flow entering and exiting flight was, especially how each suit had different animations to go with flight. I also forgot how the world was just gigantic and connected with very few loading screens and plenty of populating the world. Can you see why people were excited for the potential when the game came out looking like this? There's a level of interconnected world that most games of this kind don't get. Think of Outriders, a game that I liked more than Anthem overall, but it's filled with loading screens because the game just couldn't handle the level of technical achievement that Anthem had. I also really was getting interested in the new enemy designs and the ability-based combat, as these were portions of the base game I think everyone mostly liked. I think there was also a good amount of world building in the lore and the life of the world. Admittedly, I don't want to go too deep in the story or lore because a lot of it resided in the potential of Anthem 2.0. Lots of loose ends with buzzwords of names and places mentioned like there was a lot of sequel bait. It reminded me of fighting Crota in the first year of Destiny and hearing about Oryx through the environments and lore. I wasn't about to commit my time to something that will never exist. I like the concept of the Anthem, a concept that every single thing in the world has a sound to it that works together. Other than that, the strongholds were the best part of the game. Bosses that felt unique, mechanics that were a little bit of a step up from the rest of the game, and at the tail end of my time, there was a stronghold that was about as close to a Destiny raid as possible, and in the very early vision of Anthem 2.0 that we'll talk a bit about. We're thrown into the planet Coda, and you are a freelancer, a heroic adventurer who wears a powerful exosuit to defend humanity from the threats beyond the city walls. The Anthem is about the Anthem of Creation, a powerful and mysterious force responsible for most of the extraordinary technology, phenomena, and threats of the world. We are shown in a cutscene that things were peaceful for a time, until bald Elon Musk came to wreak havoc. Now you must find the Heart of Rage and put a stop to the Xenotaph, so all the enemies like bald Elon Musk and Dr. Doom can't use the Anthem of Creation for bad. You meet this guy named Owen, who might sound familiar.
I know you. Okay, when's my birthday? Trick question. You don't like celebrating birthdays.
And there will be no British voice actor betrayal here, I promise. Along the way, you trick Dr. Doom and say this line.
One rusty old javelin in exchange for all those lives. That's generous, don't you think?
He's trying to trace your location. I'm picking up Dominion soldiers in the area.
No, there is no javelin. Get glitched.
There's no way he just said get glitched.
That is the
There's no
cringiest
fucking
line.
way he just said get glitched.
That is the craziest
There is no way he
line.
just said get glitched. Then you eat testicles for a princess. I'm not joking. Then Owen decides for literally no reason to betray you and take the General Tarsus legendary javelin of Dawn. So he can live out his dream of being a freelancer? Owen then joins forces with Dr. Doom, just to then still work with you. But nobody else, okay? Owen then gets beat up by Dr. Doom and gives you the part you will need to make a shield powerful enough to reach the Heart of Rage and defeat Dr. Doom. You end up fighting a larger version of the boss, but just as you think the final health bar is there for the final stand of the fight, this happens. Cutscene. I am Anthem. Oh my.
Give us a hand! Hey!
Where the fuck did that come from?
What are you doing here? Are you alright? Did you see that?
How did he not
Jay
hear
was connected
that?
to the
What is
bottom.
up with her eyes?
Cypher to Cypher. She knows what to do. How's she doing? I don't know. Not great!
I'm doing better than you.
Well, you can. You got this. Faye! Let go! Come back!
It's beautiful.
Faye!
No! Hey! Hey, no!
You said one job. No, I didn't.
You did. I was there. You were very clear.
I mean, maybe I want to renegotiate.
Okay, so why are we like playing this off like there's not still a boss health bar? No way they're gonna end it like that. There's no way! There's no way that's it! There's no way they end the campaign like that! Then the game just ends. But not before teasing Anthem 2.
Inside the eastern border. Killed 2 of our team before we were able to put it down. And I mapped the region on it.
Urgoth. You've heard of them.
What?
From stories.
What?
Famous, but they're
what?
long gone.
Yeah, it's safe to say why people only remember the abilities and the flight. The story was really bad. The endgame was also very shallow overall. Yeah, you can earn some gear and weapons, but there's not that final place to test everything you've learned like there was in Destiny's first year with the Vault of Glass. And it's not like there's PvP to hold you over either. Anthem was by all means a vanilla experience, but I did mention the 2.0 vision and the one activity that showed me what could have been for Anthem, and that was called the Seasonal Stronghold. By my time being finished with this game and kind of burnt out already, a viewer told me to check out this thing called the Sunken Cell. And this wasn't your traditional stronghold. This was filled with bonus chests, puzzle mechanics, extra incentives for scoring higher tiers, and more loot, and a better boss than normal, albeit still not anything like a Destiny raid boss. The Sunken Cell was a linear chamber of floors, then swimming through the level, unlocking new places every breathstroke, and loot matched the challenge. Now, I was hard carried, but this was clearly something new and different. And this tells me it was a damn shame BioWare couldn't continue this project some more. I genuinely think that if Anthem 2.0 released, people would still be playing this game in a similar fashion to how Warframe still gets played. Would it have been as big as a Destiny or a Warframe? Probably not, because the third-person looter shooter MMO light space has competition already, but it could have had a real dedicated player base. And here's where the story stops being just Anthem bad and becomes Anthem important, because Anthem's death isn't just about a failed live service plan. It's about ownership, and it's about what we are paying for now. It's about the Stop Killing Games movement, and Anthem is basically Exhibit A. When Anthem's servers shut down, Anthem didn't become a finished game. Anthem didn't become a preserved snapshot. Anthem didn't become an offline version you can revisit. Anthem became nothing. And in January of 2026, people actually did the thing you always see with dying live service games. They went on for one last flight. They took final screenshots. They made farewell posts. They mourn the potential. And I want you to sit with how insane that is for a second. In more traditional times, if a studio stops supporting a game, you still own the disc or the download. You could boot it up. You could still replay it. It became part of gaming history. But with the always online live service game style, when support ends, the game ceases to exist. This is the central argument behind movements like Stop Killing Games. It is not keep every server online forever. That's not realistic. What people are asking for is a dignified end, an offline mode when possible, tools for community servers, a preservation plan, a way for the product you sold to still be accessible after you stop monetizing it. Because right now, publishers are selling games that function more like leases. You are paying for access, you are not paying for ownership, and you often don't realize it until the day the lights go out. And Anthem is not alone. Look at Ubisoft's The Crew. Ubisoft delisted it and then shut down the servers at the end of March 2024. And then, yeah, I know, you can meme on it all you want to. Look at Concord, which infamously went offline permanently roughly 2 weeks after launch. I want you to imagine buying a multiplayer only game, getting invested, and the game's existence gets measured in days. That's not just a failure, that's a preview of a future where games can be disposable products in the most literal sense. And here's the part that should make everyone uncomfortable. It's not just the small ones. Even the giants, the untouchables, are still built on the same fragile foundation. We archive movies, we preserve music, we print books, but for games, we're building an entire era of experiences that can simply vanish. Anthem is what it looks like when that happens.